Welcome back to Coral Knights. Didn't expect to come back to this storyline, huh? Well, that's because there's a minor arc that I just recently got the chance to revise. I'm AJ, and I'm just going to call this the Crossroads arc. Now, this story arc occurs after Coral Knights 2, but right before Coral Knights 3. So this takes place in February of 2019. At the start of the month, the Coral Knights, with a K, was sailing their victory high. They had just liberated Outworlds from the Netherrealm merger, but with the Revenant still around, they could plot another attack at any moment. However, Edward's latest additions to his army included Persona users and the X-Squad 13, so they weren't that concerned about a counterattack. With so much confidence, Edward was planning to expand the business by reaching out to the media alignments for more members and franchise representation. And one stood out. From the beginning, Edward had specific entertainment properties from the Coral alignment that would be enlisted as the pillars of his production and army. And for the most part, he was able to get them all. Almost. There was one franchise Edward knew he was going to have difficulty getting, so he decided to not go for it initially.
Oh yeah, I fucking love Star Wars!
Now, you might think that would be a weird inclusion to Coral Knights. Star Wars is an entertainment property tightly nested in the Disney alignment, having ties to the Sub-Coral alignment during the original trilogy and the Warner alignment during the prequels. But one could argue that during the 2000s, Star Wars was the Warner alignment's bitch. Both Clone Wars series aired on Cartoon Network. Many of their shows referenced the movies, the Robot Chicken specials, they even aired Thumb Wars.
Bruh.
And if you really want to go back, Spaceballs is a Warner alignment parody of 70s and 80s sci-fi, primarily focusing on the original trilogy. But it was during the 2000s where the entertainment property dipped its toes into Coral alignment water. And to be specific, the source of all Coral alignment activities was entirely located in Episode 2. From set pieces, to character designs, to locations, they made a Duck Dodgers short that specifically parodied Attack of the Clones. However, all of the Coral influence dissolved by the time Episode 3 started its marketing, making Episode 2 not just the worst film in the series, at the time, but all within Coral alignment domain. Later on, Soul Calibur 4, a Coral alignment franchise, featured Star Wars guest characters, a reminder that the IP does hold relevancy in the alignment. Now, when Disney picked up the series in 2012, everything moved to that alignment. So by the time Coral Knights started in 2015, the Disney Civil War was not only underway, but the sequel trilogy was on the horizon, where the prequels were purged out of everyone's memories, a 1-2 punch for Edward to not enlist the Astral Souls in the Sky Galaxy. But 2019 would sing a different song. Public distrust between the sequels and their audience was growing at an alarming rate. Solo did not do well at the box office, and reappreciation for the prequels was all the craze. Now that the Civil War was over, Edward decided to reach out to the alignment and see if he could make some connections. And Disney was open to trade. This was during the Neo-Disney Fighting Evolution storyline, where Mickey was more active on the Astral Soul side of his company and wanted to restore the alignment's public image by interacting with other alignments. He specifically sought out the Coral alignment because he had some tools he could acquire. Believe it or not, during the early 2000s, both alignments ran parallel with one another. They didn't intersect or blend the same way as the Warner alignment influenced the Coral alignment, but they always had an equal share on certain products side by side, especially in the UK. After the 20th Century Fox buyout, Disney now owned a lot of movies primarily in the Coral alignment, including some of the X-Men movies, fucking Daredevil. With Coral Knights, Mickey wanted to improve the relationship with the alignment and consider Edward a strong business partner, and, if needed, a strong ally with what was going on in his alignment at the time. In other words, Edward wanted something from Mickey, and Mickey wanted something from Edward. And Coral Knights already had a hook with Disney, with one of their members, Angel, being one of the leads in the, at the time cancelled, Wild and Crazy Guy Day series under the Disney alignment. All Edward and Mickey had to do was arrange a meeting at the Coral Knights owned Hilton. But that was going to be tricky. Edward didn't want Melina to be in the building when Mickey came over, expecting Miss Lilith joining as well. And her and Melina's relationship is not good. See Pierce to Heavens for that. So Edward had to wait for the right day where Melina was occupied to not be in the building, which would allow Mickey to come over. Meanwhile, in Outworld, Kotal was almost done reconstructing the realm by February, relieved that it was finally separated from Netherrealm after 4 years. But Kotal didn't wait by doing nothing in between. For starters, he had a girl. Him and Jade were in an intimate relationship during his time in Earthrealm and wanted to marry her the moment the Revenant conflict was resolved. But with him knowing that the real Katana was alive and in hiding, it didn't sit right for him that he was still ruling Outworld. He told Katana countless times that she should claim her rightful place as Khan and usher a new era of peace. But every time he pleaded, she declined, saying that he was already a strong ruler for her people. She knew that they would not trust her considering her Revenant clone was still around. Raiden would be breathing down her neck at every waking moment, and the common folk of Outworld would just be reminded of Melina, who was a terrible Khan, even though it wasn't really her fault. And speaking of which, while Katana respected Melina during the first 2 seasons of Coral Knights, she still had no full trust in her, despite Melina being a changed woman. One of the many tragedies within Mortal Kombat is how Melina never had the opportunity to be with people that cared for her as a person in both the original and NRS timeline. Obviously, with the new era timeline, things are all different, but back in 2019, not the same. This resulted in me making that a part of her character in Shareverse. She was originally created to be a pawn for Shao Kahn, killing Katana and stealing her identity, only to serve Daddy for eternity, who never loved her in return. When all of those plans were thrown out the window in the 90s, Melina automatically became Khan of Outworld for 15 years with no experience. With 0 ways to contact Katana exiled in Earthrealm and nobody believing her, she sunk Outworld in more turmoil. It didn't help that Melina surrounded herself with toxic people. Literally, there were Saurians running around. And by the end of her reign, her confidants lost faith in her. Reptile was the one who ratted her out, and after Baraka's death, Ermac immediately joined Kotal's cause. Hell, even Tanya was planning to backstab Melina later on, and Rain never really cared for her end goal anyway. So when Melina was revived following her death, she fled to Earthrealm seeking refuge from Cormilla and the Coffee crew, which led to her almost dying again and transformed into a zombified walking tank. But it was really in Coral Knights where Edward and the others treated her like a human being and helped her overcome her trust issues. So by 2019, she was a friendlier and wiser woman as opposed to the savage many assume her as. But deep down, she still yearned for the comfort of having a family, with Katana being the only living relative she had that wasn't a Revenant. While Katana saw progress in Melina's redemption, she still refused to be considered a sister to the clone. Despite this, Kotal at least grew the respect to treat Melina fairly and appreciate her as a strong fighter. But Melina and Katana's relationship would be challenged in February, where the Revenants raided Outworlds once more. They noticed Kotal was still recovering, so it was easy pickings to wipe out his forces entirely. But not just that, on that same day, a portal from Earthrealm was open. A woman claiming to be Shao Kahn demanded Kotal to a fight to reclaim her throne. This is Femme Shao Kahn, a reflection who appeared in the epilogue of Digital Defenders. She has all of Shao Kahn's abilities and combined with her two Anthro servants, formed to create Drexy. Full name, the motherfucking Demon Technological T-Rex. Units is weird. With this 2-for-1 attack on Outworld, Edward ordered Katana and Melina to help out Kotal and his gang, while bringing X-Squad 13 along for backup. And with Melina out of the picture, Edward instantaneously calls Mickey to come over. Now, Mickey and Edward already assigned how the deal would play out. Someone who appeared in Episode 2 would come in and signed a contract to act as a choral representative for the Star Wars entertainment property. But Mickey wanted to make sure he was getting something in return. Both owners had 2 employees in common, 2 women with short white hair. Aside from Angel, the other wild and crazy Guy Day lead was Doll. Meanwhile, Coral Knights had 2 enlisted entertainment properties that both originated from 3D fighters, Dead or Alive and the aforementioned Soul Calibur. These girls being the mysterious assassin Christie and the British prostitute, noblewoman, Isabella Ivy Valentine. Angel was already friends with the Coral Alignment girls and wanted to introduce Doll to them anyway. Mickey wanted to have the 4 duke it out and see if the Coral Alignment would be a good investment to have as an ally. But when Mickey came to the Hilton, it was apparent that Miss Lilith wasn't with him. He told Edward that she stayed behind to monitor any potential threats in the parks. But as soon as Mickey left the parks, Lilithmon immediately went to the pool. The question now was, who did Mickey get from the Sky Galaxy to sign the contract? When looking at the list of Astro Souls who were in Attack of the Clones, many of them were unavailable. The Skywalkers wanted to be left alone, Boba had no interest, Jango and Dooku stayed dead, all of the Jedi were at peace as Force ghosts, nobody wanted Palpatine, and Mickey would not go for a glup shitto like Jar Jar or Dexter Jester. But there was one person whose name was cited for availability. Someone that could be a perfect representative. Yeah, it was Zam. So, the last time Zam appeared in Shareverse, she was going after my reflection for the Empire during the rehabilitation arc. But starting in 2010, she just disappeared, to the point where the Empire classified her as killed in action. AJ had no idea where she had gone, and quite frankly, he couldn't care. In actuality, Zam was hiding from the Empire. It turns out, she was told that if she didn't kill my reflection by the end of 2009, the Empire would execute her. And because she failed, she stayed on Earth, not being able to get back to her bounty hunting job in her galaxy. The only time she made public appearances was in the yearly Star Wars weekends in Disney at the time, but that's about it. From the 2012 Lucasfilm acquisition, the Disney alignment had complete watch over Palpatine, so he wasn't gonna plan any major grand attacks anytime soon. And when the alignment found out about Zam's contract with the Empire, they immediately terminated it. Since then, Zam became indebted to Mickey for allowing her to continue her job and to make a livable profit. A life debt, if you will. But exiled or not, she never makes that much of a reward as a bounty hunter, since many others in the field are just better than her, and most people assume she's bad at it, favoring more professional and popular hunters. Yeah, that's what makes Zam such an interesting character in the Star Wars universe. She's not irrelevant to the grand arcing lore, since the assassination plot, no matter how stupid it was, leads to the Clone Wars and the subsequent fall of the Republic. But she's not popular enough to be considered a glup shitto in the same way as other bounty hunters are, like Dengar or Zuckuss. She's a character nobody would complain if she's around, but one that people would not go out of their way to track down. And Mickey is well aware of her place in the Sky Galaxy, which is why she was present in the parks annually. Over the years, Mickey realized Zam was good at one thing: reliability. If he can't get a Jedi, Sith, smuggler, or another bounty hunter, she always has a free spot in her schedule that Mickey could drag to any occasion. He had used her in the past for events where she worked as crowd control and security. So he was hoping this meeting would allow her to be more active on Earth whenever she was in the Milky Way galaxy. She was considered the prize reward to Edward if the deal went smoothly, allowing her to be one of the representatives that Coral Knights enlists. These representatives are astral souls who are not necessarily in the Coral alignment, but their entertainment properties do have ties to them, no matter how small the connection. Among the Hall of Reps, the Ninten trio had made a singular appearance, and Zam noticed Samus was on the board. Definitely no sexual tension between these two. Mickey and Edward decided the best way to prove the Coral alignment was worthy was to have two matches with their two white-haired fighters. If Edward's girls take out the Wilds and Crazy Guy they leads, it would prove to Mickey that the alignment was a faithful ally. First was Christy against Angel, and Christy immediately put her in a fatal position, causing Angel to tap out. Next was Doll and Ivy. Doll barely squeaked out in the end. The score was 1-1, and in the event of a tiebreaker, Mickey and Edward agreed that they would fight one another. But Mickey backpedaled on the offer, claiming he was saving his strength for more serious conflicts. Instead, he told Zam to fight Edward. Over on the Melina side, Kotal split the reinforcements upon their arrival. X-Squad 13 would stick with his group fighting the Revenants, and Melina was tasked to fight Fem Shao, while Katana fought her lackeys. Jade couldn't really help her boyfriend in this situation because this was still during the time she posed herself as a Revenant and worked undercover gathering intel for Earthrealm, meaning she was playing for Team Revenants this night. But having Melina fight Fem Shao was a bad idea. Not only did this reflection have the original Shao Kahn powers and mannerisms, but that included his knowledge about Outworld to boot, including the notion that Melina considered him her father. And she used that to her advantage, attacking Melina with psychological warfare and convincing her to serve her father's reign. Katana caught wind of the manipulation and tried to help Melina, but it was too late. In a freak-out rage of confusion and identity crisis, Melina instantly activated her Shining Ray form and lashed out at Katana. But Katana knew how dangerous she was as an unstable beast, and it called for drastic measures. Now, whenever Katana fought during her time in exile, she always reserved her true Edenian power, fearing it would expose her identity to her opponent. But in a case like this, there was nothing holding back. She removed her clothing to show her classic leotard underneath and took out her pants. Just by these actions alone, Katana's power level soared, revealing the princess in her most purest form. She commenced combat with Melina, and at first they were on equal footing with their maximum power. But during the fight, Katana switched tactics. Knowing that Fem Shao was the one behind the fight, she began to tell Melina to snap out of her manipulation and reveal the truth that the real Shao Kahn would have never loved Melina as a daughter, that her existence was only used to remove a roadblock in his conquest. But Melina didn't budge, instead continuing her warhorse mentality and incapacitating Katana with a shot to the leg. Femshao applauded her daughter's fighting and ordered Melina,
Finish her!
but in one last act of desperation, Katana pleaded Melina to wake up, this time calling her her sister. This one word made Melina stop charging her shoulder cannon while getting yelled at by Femshao to kill her. Instead, Melina turned around and fired a shot at the imposter, but the blast was deflected. She offered her hand to Katana, asking for them to fight together, as family. Upon the betrayal, Femshao formed Drexy, but was ultimately no match for the Edenians' speed and strength. In the end, Melina reverted to her base form, and both her and Katana unleashed a dual coral blast, killing the demonic robotic dinosaur. Melina had spent all of her energy from the fight and was knocked out. Meanwhile, Kotal had no issues taking out the Revenants with Edward's men on his side, and it only boosted his trust and support from the people of Outworld, eventually kicking Liu Kang and his cronies out of the realm once more. Katana reminded Kotal that the people truly need a strong ruler like him to be Khan, and told him to take care of things for her until her return when the time was right. She departed back to Earthrealm, carrying the conscious Melina on her shoulders. And now we circle back to Edward. He had the expectation that he would be fighting Zam anyway. He took his shirt off and invited her to a fair fight. No weapons, no transformations, just a clean fight. Zam removed all of her armor, depressurizing her suit, revealing a rigged-up undersuit that helped control her shape-shifting skills while hunting. Once the fight began, it was already over. Edward never made the first punch, and he would just counter all of her attacks as an act of defense. She would get the wind knocked out of her multiple times, but she kept fighting. Despite Edward showing no signs of damage from anything she threw at him. But to wrap up the fight, Edward asked Zam to land a punch on him with all of her might. And with a tired yell, she ran up to him and punched him square in the face. The only thing Edward said was if that was what she called a punch. He told Mickey to call the fight in his favor, meaning that the coral alignment won the competition. He then drew his attention back to Zam, sobbing that she could not prove to herself that she was strong enough to be a representative the same way Samus was in the production. But Edward told her that she did a good job. Even though Edward suffered no injuries, he could see Zam wanted to be something more, show others that she can be competent. And with that, Edward welcomed her as a choral representative of the Star Wars entertainment property for his production, signing the contract and even taking a photo to place on the wall. And Zam specifically asked for her photo to be placed right next to her girlfriend. I mean, the other bounty hunter in the production. Zam left optimistic, looking forward to working alongside Edward in the future. Right when Mickey and his group left, Edward's men returned. Melina was once again hospitalized from her wounds and left in her room. When she came to, Edward debriefed her on everything while she was gone. He told her she did a good job saving Outworld, and that Kotal gained more respect for her. After he left, Melina sat on her bed in silence, reflecting on the last moments of the raid. The truth about Shao Kahn never loving her, her sister's plea, and what it meant to be a person and not an object. But her thoughts were interrupted by another visitor, Katana. She started to grudgingly apologize for not appreciating Melina sooner, but began to break down in tears, regretting the chance to help her rebuild Outworld back in the 90s, or turning her back on her during the Pierce the Heavens storyline. She vowed to never leave her alone again. And to seal the promise, she hugged Melina for the first time in her life. Melina was stunned, but instantly hugged back. After a moment of bonding, Katana left to go back home, knowing that she finally has someone to call family after so many centuries. As mentioned in other videos, in March, the Chronica Crisis occurred in the Coral Alignment, where the end results featured the restoration of the Revenants and Liu Kang becoming the new protector of Earthrealm and the Hourglass, with Katana by his side. As for Kotal, he continued to rule over Outworld, and he finally got to tie the knot with Jade. Outside of Coral Knights, Melina partnered with Rex, where AJ hoped to get both of them in their respective fighting games as DLC. For more information on that, watch Super Smash Lesbians Ultimate. And lastly, for Zam. She didn't hear back from Edward for the rest of the year. But in 2020, Edward had more time on his hands and gave her a call, saying she would be involved in a new project. This project would be a game for Astral Souls that told an Elseworld story, one where Edward awakened from his coma 5 years before he did in Shareverse. The what if was called Proto Knights, and it showed how differently many of the members would interact with each other 10 years before Coral Knights actually started. But instead of Melina being Edward's close associate, it would be Zam, confusing him and AJ since they have the same skeletal model number. A post-game bonus was Zam having a devil form, much to the akin of Devil Futaba and Devil Kula from the Coral Knights storyline. Of course, Zam couldn't fly in this form or shoot any lasers in Shareverse. It was all purely cosmetics. And that's all I will be saying about that. And as mentioned before, Mickey now considered the Coral Alignment as a reliable ally in what was going on during Neo Disney Fighting Evolution. Even though he didn't use them as much as he hoped them to, Mickey at the very least knew that in the Coral Alignment, Disney's image was properly being restored. And that is the little detour to Coral Knights and this sub-story, if you want to call it that. This was just a small but really nice storyline that I wanted to get back to and touch up some things. Because who knows, things that I brought up in this little guide-in might reappear in future videos. But with that said, if you liked this mini arc, please like the video, and subscribe for more content, because trust me, Neo Disney Fighting Evolution is only getting started. Until then, I'm AJ, and I'll see you all in the next one.